Neurons and neurotransmitters. Human body contains many different kinds of cells, like liver cells, kidney cells, heart cells, nerve cells, and so on. The brain and nervous system are made up of two basic types of cells: nerve cells, called neurons, and glia. There are about 10 to 50 times more glia than nerve cells, but neurons are the key players in the brain. Neurons receive and transmit signals to different parts of the body and helps our body to perform different tasks. Structure of neuron consists of three basic parts: cell body, axon, and a dendrite. Within the cell body is a nucleus, which controls the cell's activities. The axon looks like a long tail that transmits messages from the cell. And dendrites look like the branches of a tree that receive messages for the cell. Neurons are formed by the process of neurogenesis. Neurogenesis usually begins around the 10th week of pregnancy and ends around the 25th week. During this period, a group of cells in the embryo, called stem cells, receive chemical signals to develop into the primary cells of the brain, called neurons. Although the majority of neurons are already present in our brains by the time we are born, neurogenesis is a lifelong process. After birth, the process of neurogenesis mostly occurs in the hippocampus region of the brain, where neural stem cells increase by dividing in two and producing either two new stem cells or two nerve cells. For performing different tasks of the body, neurons must communicate with each other, and the communication between two neurons happens in the synaptic cleft, which is the small gap between the synapses of the neurons. Here, electrical signals that have traveled along the length of the axon are briefly converted into chemical ones through the release of neurotransmitters, causing a specific response in the receiving neuron. Neurotransmitters are small amine molecules, amino acids, or neuropeptides that are synthesized in neurons, packaged in vesicles, and stored in nerve endings. As we have discussed early that neurons communicate with each other with the help of neurotransmitters at the synapse, let us see how that communication works. Each neural synapse consists of three parts: presynaptic membrane, which is the membrane of axon terminal; postsynaptic membrane, which is the membrane of the target cell, mostly the dendrite; and the synaptic cleft, which is a gap between the presynaptic and postsynaptic membranes. Inside the terminal of the presynaptic nerve fiber, numerous vesicles that contain neurotransmitters are stored. When the presynaptic membrane is depolarized by an action potential, the neurotransmitters in the terminal membrane of presynaptic membrane get stimulated, which results in exocytosis of neurotransmitters from the terminal into the synaptic cleft. After crossing the synaptic cleft, neurotransmitters bind to their receptors on the postsynaptic membrane. Once the neurotransmitter binds to its receptor, the channels of the postsynaptic membrane either open or close. These channels are the ion channels, and their opening or closing alters the permeability of the postsynaptic membrane to calcium, sodium, potassium, and chloride ions. If a neurotransmitter stimulates the target cell to an action, then it is an excitatory neurotransmitter acting in an excitatory synapse. On the other hand, if it inhibits the target cell, it is an inhibitory neurotransmitter acting in an inhibitory synapse. So, the type of the synapse and the response of the target tissue depends on the type of neurotransmitter. Excitatory neurotransmitters cause depolarization of the postsynaptic cells and generate an action potential. For example, acetylcholine stimulates muscle contraction, while inhibitory synapses cause hyperpolarization of the target cells, thus inhibiting their action. The neurotransmitters released into the synaptic cleft acts for a very short duration. They're either destroyed by enzymes or reabsorbed by neurons. Aside from neurotransmitters that have an inhibitory or excitatory response, there are also neuromodulators, which are synapse-associated neurotransmitters. Neuromodulators aren't reabsorbed as quickly by neurons or broken down by enzymes. Instead, they spend a significant amount of time in the synapse and modulate the activity of several other neurons in the brain. The best-known neuromodulator neurotransmitters are dopamine, serotonin, histamine, and norepinephrine. Our brain needs neurotransmitters to regulate many necessary functions, including heart rate, breathing, sleep cycles, digestion, mood, concentration, appetite, and muscle movement, etc. There are more than 40 neurotransmitters in the human nervous system. But in this video, we will discuss a few important neurotransmitters and their function. Acetylcholine. Acetylcholine was the first neurotransmitter to be identified in 1914. Acetylcholine is made up of acetic acid and choline. It is an abundant neurotransmitter in the human body. It is found in both the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. It functions as an excitatory neurotransmitter and is stored in vesicles at the ends of cholinergic neurons. In the peripheral nervous system, acetylcholine is released into the neuromuscular junction and controls muscle contraction. For example, the brain might send out a signal to move the right arm. The signal is carried by nerve fibers to the neuromuscular junctions. The signal is transmitted across this junction by the acetylcholine neurotransmitter, triggering the desired response in those specific muscles. Having high levels of acetylcholine can cause too much muscle contraction. This can lead to muscle spasms. Beside muscle contraction, in the central nervous system, acetylcholine plays an important role in memory and learning, due to which its deficiency can lead to Alzheimer's disease. Glutamate. Glutamate is synthesized in the central nervous system from glutamine by the enzyme glutaminase. This can occur in the presynaptic neuron or in neighboring glial cells. Glutamate is the most powerful excitatory neurotransmitter of the central nervous system. It is secreted by sensory and cerebral cortex neurons. Glutamate plays an essential role in normal brain functioning, and its levels must be tightly regulated. At normal concentrations, glutamate helps in learning and memory. However, at high concentrations, the increased cellular activity caused by glutamate results in overexcitation of nerve cells, which eventually leads to neural cell death. Glutamate deficiency in the brain is believed to cause symptoms including concentration problems, mental exhaustion, and insomnia, sleeplessness. Dopamine. You might have heard that dopamine is the feel-good neurotransmitter. Dopamine is produced from the amino acids tyrosine and phenylalanine, both of which can be obtained from protein-rich foods. Dopamine is secreted by the neurons of the substantia nigra, which is the region in the midbrain. It is considered as a neuromodulator. Dopamine is strongly associated with pleasure and reward. When you begin to associate a particular activity with pleasure, just anticipating it may be enough to raise dopamine levels. It could be a certain food, sex, shopping, or just about anything else that you enjoy. For example, when you eat double chocolate chip cookies, your brain may increase dopamine, and the flood of dopamine acts to reinforce this craving and focus on satisfying it in the future. Low dopamine can lead to depression, while high dopamine level can cause hallucination and mania, which is extreme high energy and mood. It is thought that dopamine can also play a role in the coordination of body movements, and a shortage can be seen in those with Parkinson's disease patients. Serotonin. Serotonin is a modulator neurotransmitter produced by brainstem and the intestines. The intestines produce almost all of the body's serotonin supply and is required to promote healthy digestion, so we can say that serotonin is also a hormone. Serotonin cannot cross the blood-brain barrier. This means that the brain must produce any serotonin that it needs to use. Serotonin balances out the excessive excitatory neurotransmitter effects. A deficit in serotonin can be linked to depression, sadness, fatigue, suicidal thoughts, and anxiety, whereby when there is too much serotonin in the brain, this could lead to restlessness, hallucinations, and confusion. Norepinephrine, also known as noradrenaline. It is an excitatory neurotransmitter produced by the brainstem, hypothalamus, and adrenal glands and released into the bloodstream. In the brain, it increases the level of alertfulness and wakefulness. Low norepinephrine concentration can lead to mood disorders such as depression and anxiety, while an abnormally high concentration of it may lead to an impaired sleep cycle and cause insomnia. GABA. Gamma-aminobutyric acid, in short GABA, is synthesized in the cytoplasm of the presynaptic neuron from the precursor glutamate by the enzyme glutamate decarboxylase. GABA is the most powerful inhibitory neurotransmitter produced by the neurons of the spinal cord, cerebellum, basal ganglia, and many areas of the cerebral cortex. Functions of GABA are closely related to mood and emotions. It has an inhibitory action, which stops neurons from becoming overexcited. This is why low levels of GABA can cause anxiety, restlessness, and epilepsy, which is the condition caused by overexcitation of neurons. Histamine. Histamine is an excitatory neurotransmitter produced by neurons of the hypothalamus. In the central nervous system, it is important for wakefulness, blood pressure, pain, and sexual behavior. Its deficiency leads to hypersomnia. Epinephrine. Epinephrine is involved in the body's fight-or-flight response. It is both a hormone and a neurotransmitter. Epinephrine is produced in a small group of neurons in the human brain, specifically in the medulla oblongata, but most of the epinephrine is produced in the adrenal gland. When a person is stressed or scared, their body may release epinephrine. Epinephrine increases heart rate and breathing and gives the muscles a jolt of energy. It also helps the brain make quick decisions in the face of danger. High levels of epinephrine for long periods of time cause high blood pressure, diabetes, heart diseases, and decreased immunity. Thank you.